Celeste Van Alten didn't believe in weakness, not in others, and especially not in herself, which made lying motionless in a hospital bed, tethered to tubes and machines, feel like a personal insult. Her lips were still painted crimson, her hair perfectly arranged in tight silver waves, and her silk scarf matched the color of her heels, folded neatly on a chair across the room. Even here, in this cold suite at the top of the city's most expensive private hospital, she demanded control. But control was slipping. Dr. Priya Nasser stood across from her, flanked by a monitor beeping at intervals that felt too loud for the sterile silence between them. "Your kidneys are failing, Mrs. Van Alten," the doctor said carefully. "We're reaching critical levels. Dialysis will keep you alive, but only a transplant will offer any real future." Celeste's fingers twitched on the crisp white blanket. "Put me on the list." Dr. Nasser's mouth tightened. "You're already on it. But the wait is long, and age isn't in your favor. Statistically, I didn't ask for statistics." Celeste cut her off. Her voice held the same edge she used in boardrooms and benefit galas. Next to her stood her son, Soren Van Alten, tall, immaculately dressed, every inch the heir to the Van Alten empire. But his clenched jaw betrayed the storm within. His mother might have been the one with organs failing, but it was his resolve that felt ready to collapse. "There must be someone in the family," he said. "You already tested," Dr. Nasser replied gently. "You're not a match. We did a full extended family trace based on your medical records." Soren folded his arms. "And there's one possible match, very strong compatibility." Celeste sat up straighter, every muscle tense. "Who?" Dr. Nasser glanced at her tablet. "Isla Monroe." The name struck the room like broken glass. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Celeste's voice dropped to ice. "Absolutely not." Soren's breath hitched. He hadn't heard Isla's name aloud in years. He'd buried her memory under work, hotels, headlines, and late nights staring at their old photographs. But there it was, Isla Monroe, the only woman who had ever truly known him. The woman his mother had forced from his life with whispers, rumors, and a social crucifixion that had left them both in ruins. And now she was his mother's only hope. "I'll reach out to her," Soren said. His voice was steady, but his stomach twisted. "You will do no such thing," Celeste snapped. "She's not family. Not anymore. She was my wife. She was a mistake." Soren's eyes hardened. "Then it's a mistake that might keep you alive." That night, Soren returned to his penthouse, but he didn't pour himself a drink. He didn't answer emails. He sat in the dark, phone in hand, thumb hovering over a number he never deleted. Isla. He'd drafted the message 100 times since the divorce, never hitting send, always wondering what he'd say if he ever had the chance. But this time it wasn't about apologies or regrets. This was a plea, not just from a son trying to save his mother, but from a man who never stopped loving the woman he lost. He stared at her name glowing on the screen. Then he typed, "I need to see you. It's urgent." Back in the hospital, Celeste dialed a private number. "She can't be involved," she hissed into the phone. "Find someone else. Offer whatever it takes." The voice on the other end responded calmly, "There is no one else. Not with this level of compatibility. I'd rather die than owe that girl a thing." And yet, despite her venom, her hand trembled as she ended the call. For the first time in her life, power slipped through her fingers, and it terrified her. "Hello, my beautiful family. Stay with me, because by the time this story ends, you'll question whether you could forgive the unforgivable, or love again after being broken." We trimmed the length of this story to get straight to the point. No fluff, no filler. Just a powerful, unforgettable story of betrayal, redemption, and the cost of grace. But before we dive in, I have a small favor to ask. Give the like button a quick tap. It lets YouTube know these stories matter and helps share them with more amazing viewers like you. And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a single story we tell. Now then, let's continue. Miles away, Isla Monroe stood in front of her studio's window wall, sunlight warming her bare arms. She sipped coffee in silence, unaware that her past was barreling back toward her like a freight train. Unaware that the man she once gave everything to would walk through her door before the hour was done. The quiet of the Colorado morning was broken only by the soft click of Isla Monroe's heels across the slate floors of her design studio. Glass walls wrapped around the space, letting golden sunlight wash over white oak tables stacked with samples, quartz, reclaimed timber, silk finishes, and layered textiles. It was a place of creation, control, and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos she had once lived in. She paused in front of a mood board, adjusting a corner fabric swatch. Minimalist elegance, natural warmth. Her clients loved that about her style. It felt lived in, but elevated. Grounded, yet aspirational, much like the woman herself. 3 years ago, Isla had been one of New York's most whispered about women. The divorce had splashed across every glossy tabloid. A failed social experiment, they'd called her, an interior architect who tried to marry into the American aristocracy. Now, in Aspen, she was someone else entirely. Respected, self-made, and mostly healed, until the door opened. The chime of the door wasn't alarming. Clients often walked in without appointments, tech CEOs seeking retreats, art collectors looking to renovate private chalets. But when she turned, the coffee in her hand stilled. Black coat, storm gray eyes, a jawline that hadn't changed. Soren Van Alten stood in her doorway like a ghost she had never stopped loving. For a second, neither of them moved. Soren? She whispered. His name felt too intimate on her tongue. Too familiar for a stranger. Too painful for a man who once swore to protect her. Hello, Isla. She didn't invite him to sit. He didn't ask. Instead, he paced, just 3 steps back and forth, then stopped in front of her presentation table. The same way he used to when board meetings went sideways or when his mother meddled one step too far into their lives. What are you doing here? She asked, carefully setting the coffee down. His voice was rough, deeper than she remembered. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't life or death. She folded her arms, bracing. He swallowed. It's my mother. She's dying. Kidney failure. Isla's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Certainly not sympathy. And, you're the only compatible match we found. A beat passed. Then another, and the weight of his words pressed down, hard. She blinked. You can't be serious. I am. You want me to donate an organ to the woman who destroyed my life? Soren met her gaze. Yes. Isla turned away, pacing now herself. Her heels clicked louder than his voice. Do you even hear yourself? She said. She called me a social stain, said I would ruin your legacy. And you let her. You let her run me out of your life with press leaks and whispered slander. I didn't know the half of it until it was too late. No, she snapped, spinning on him. You chose not to see it. His face tightened, but he didn't defend himself. I'm not asking because she deserves it, he said. I'm asking because she's still my mother. Because the doctor said it had to be you. She laughed bitterly. Of course it had to be me. The woman your family dragged through mud, shamed publicly, and discarded. You're not discarded, he said, stepping closer. I never forgot you. Then why didn't you fight for me? The question hung between them like frost. I didn't know how to fight both of you, he admitted. And I lost you because of it. Isla looked down, breath shallow. And what happens if I say no? Soren's voice dropped. Then I walk out that door, and thank you for your time. No begging. No manipulation. Just honesty. She wasn't used to that from the Van Altens. She wasn't sure she trusted it now. I need time, she murmured. He nodded once. I'll be at the White Elms until tomorrow. And then he turned, leaving the scent of cologne and broken history in his wake. That night, Isla sat on her rooftop terrace, wrapped in a blanket, trying not to think about Soren. But memories crept in anyway. The last night in Montauk, their beach house under a rainstorm. Her suitcase zipped by the door. His voice breaking as he said, don't go. But she had, because staying meant disappearing. And now here he was, asking her to step into the fire again. Not for love, not for closure, but to save the very woman who tried to erase her. She took a shaky breath, staring into the aspen sky. You couldn't fight for me then, Soren, she whispered. Why should I fight for her now? If your ex begged you to help their cruel parents survive, would you say yes or walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's talk about hard choices. Also, while you are at it, don't forget to hit the like button. Her phone buzzed late that night. One new message from an unsaved number. No pressure, no guilt, just hope. Thank you for listening. No name, no request. Just a man, stripped of pride, waiting in silence. Ayla Monroe tossed in bed, her her silk sheets tangled around her legs. The aspen moonlight poured across her bedroom floor, painting long silver lines she refused to walk. She had always been decisive. In business, she was the woman executives trusted to transform empty space into something unforgettable. But tonight, no blueprint could help her construct clarity. Her mind wasn't quiet. It screamed in echoes. She'd built this life to escape the ghosts of the Van Altens, especially the one with ocean gray eyes and hands that once held her like she was priceless. But now he had walked right back in, not with apologies, not with love, but with a need she never expected. His mother's life, in her hands, and he had the audacity to ask. She opened the drawer beside her bed and pulled out a small leather photo album, something she never displayed, never showed. Her fingers flipped slowly. There it was, a photo from Montauk, she and Soren, barefoot on their deck, wind tangling her hair as he kissed her temple. It had been a Tuesday morning. She remembered the smell of blueberry pancakes, how he'd spun her in the kitchen, how she believed nothing in the world could touch them. Then his mother called, and everything unraveled. She remembered the coldness that crept into his eyes after that. The publicist's damage control meetings, the boardroom murmurs, the way he stopped asking how her day was, the way he let the world blame her. Even after all that, she hadn't hated him. She hated that she still wanted him. The next morning, Isla sat across from her closest friend, Lee, at a quiet cafe downtown. Lee had been her assistant once, but now ran her own boutique design firm thanks to Isla's mentorship. He has some nerve showing up, Lee said, sipping her oat latte. Isla stirred her tea, eyes lost in thought. You're seriously considering this? Lee pressed. It's not about her, Isla said slowly. It's about what's right. And you think giving away an organ to a woman who tried to erase you is what's right. I think I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least think about it. Lee exhaled. You're a better person than me. No, Isla replied. Just someone who's still trying to finish a chapter I never wanted to end. By mid-afternoon, Isla found herself behind the wheel of her Lexus, the Colorado scenery rushing past in warm tones and dry pine. She wasn't sure when she decided to go, but the weight pressing on her chest had become unbearable. It wasn't just about the transplant. It was about facing him, and her, and the version of herself she'd buried 3 years ago. She arrived at the White Elms Hotel just after 5. She stepped out of the car and paused. This wasn't just a favor. This was her crossing a line. Soren opened the hotel suite door on the first knock. For a moment, he didn't speak, just stared at her. You came, he said, breath uneven. I didn't say yes, she replied. I know. There was no grandeur inside, no champagne, no apology roses, just a coffee table littered with medical folders, hospital brochures, and a single takeout container she recognized from their favorite Thai place in Soho. You remembered my order, she said quietly. I never forgot anything about you. She sat down. He joined her. The silence between them had teeth. Tell me everything, she finally said. Soren didn't sugarcoat. He explained the medical situation in detail. Celeste's numbers, the urgency, the rejection of other matches. He spoke with precision but not detachment. This wasn't supposed to fall on you, he finished. If I could give her mine, I would. Hell, if I could buy one, I would. She studied his face. There were lines now that hadn't been there before. Tension that didn't fade, even when he smiled. Success had aged him, but so had heartbreak, and she'd loved both versions. You're not asking me to save her, Isla said slowly. You're asking me to save you from watching her die. His throat bobbed. Yes. She stood. He followed. You don't get to ask for this without knowing what it costs me, she said, voice shaking. Not just my body, my peace, my hard-won life. I know. I don't owe her anything. You don't. She took everything. I'm not her. Their eyes met. I know, she whispered. He didn't touch her, didn't beg. He simply let her walk away. And that restraint was what made her stop at the door. I'll take the tests, she said over her shoulder. That's all I'm promising. Soren nodded. That's more than I deserve. Hello, family. If someone from your past needed a part of you to live and they didn't deserve it, would you still offer it? Comment yes or no and tell us why. The jet touched down just after midnight. Isla didn't sleep on the flight. The city that had once spit her out welcomed her back with blinking skyline lights and cold asphalt silence. A Van Alten town car was already waiting on the tarmac, black, sleek, impersonal. She slipped into the back seat and crossed her legs, the leather cool beneath her. The driver didn't speak. She didn't ask his name. She wasn't here for pleasantries. The hospital was just 30 minutes away, but it felt like a lifetime. The elevator dinged at the private wing. Isla stepped out and found Soren waiting by the glass wall, dressed in navy slacks and a dark shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled from running his fingers through it one too many times. He looked up the moment she appeared. Neither of them smiled. "You came," he said softly. "I'm not here for her," Isla replied. "I'm here because you asked." He nodded once. "She's in 702. But what? She doesn't know you're here." Isla raised an eyebrow. "Good." Room 702 was silent except for the steady beep of monitors. Celeste Van Alten sat propped up against pristine pillows, her silver hair pinned into a tight bun, makeup still perfect, though her skin had paled from what little vitality she'd once carried. She looked up. The recognition hit instantly. "You," she hissed. "What is this, some kind of joke?" Isla didn't flinch. She took a single step in, voice calm. "No joke. Your son asked me to take a compatibility test. I said yes." Celeste's eyes narrowed into steel slits. "I don't want anything from you." Isla tilted her head. "Then maybe you should have told your kidneys to be more selective." A pause. Sharp silence. "Get out," Celeste growled. Isla stepped forward instead. "Let me be very clear. I'm not here for you. I'm not here to play nurse or saint. I'm here because the man you tried to break asked for help, and somewhere in the ruins you left behind, I still cared enough to listen." Celeste's lips trembled, not from fear, but fury. "You think this erases the past?" She said. "No," Isla answered. "But it does something you've never managed in your life. It gives someone else a chance." Soren had been listening from just down the hall. When Isla emerged, he didn't speak, just walked beside her until they reached the lobby lounge. "You didn't hold back," he said finally. "She didn't deserve gentle." He glanced at her. "And yet you came anyway." "Don't mistake grace for weakness," Isla replied. "I wouldn't dare." They sat in silence, the weight of the past pressing between them. Isla remembered the moment she packed her suitcase in silence. No shouting, no begging. Soren had stood frozen, his mother's words still echoing from that morning's confrontation. Isla had walked out with dignity, but not peace. Back then, she had hoped he'd chase her. He never did. Until now. That afternoon, Isla underwent preliminary tests. Blood draw, cross-match screening, medical history check. Soren sat in a waiting room the entire time, scrolling his phone, not really reading anything. When she walked out, their eyes met. "I'm cleared for more testing," she said. "That's good. It's just science right now. Nothing emotional." Soren stood. "Then let me at least drive you to the hotel." "I'm not staying at a hotel," Isla said flatly. "I'm staying at your penthouse." His eyebrows lifted. She added, "Your assistant offered. I accepted. The guest wing's fine." He smiled faintly. "You always did like the view, and you always assumed I came back for you." Soren's smile faded. "Didn't you?" The penthouse hadn't changed. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble finishes, oversized art pieces, but the warmth was gone. It looked polished but lonely. Isla stepped onto the balcony. Below, Manhattan pulsed. Soren joined her moments later, 2 tumblers in hand. "I figured you still like bourbon," he said, handing her one. "Only on nights I regret flying across the country for a woman who once tried to sue me for defamation." He smirked. She dropped the lawsuit. "Oh, how gracious." They stood in silence, sipping. "I shouldn't have let you go," Soren said quietly. "You didn't just let me go," she replied. "You handed me over." He winced. Isla turned to him, steady. "But I'm not the same girl who broke down in Montauk." He met her gaze. "I didn't come here expecting you to forgive, just to hear me. You're lucky I even speak your language." Later that night, Isla stood alone at the kitchen island, nursing a second glass of bourbon. She opened her purse and pulled out a slip of folded paper. A note Soren had written her years ago, stuffed in a bouquet she threw away but never forgot. It simply read, "You are the reason I breathe easier. Please don't ever stop being you." She folded it again. Not everything could be undone, but some things could begin again. just differently. The penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. Isla padded barefoot across the cool marble floor, her hair loose around her shoulders, the silk of her nightrobe barely brushing her thighs. The suite was soaked in soft city light, Manhattan glowing outside the glass like a promise she no longer believed in. She stood at the window, staring at the skyline. She hadn't come back for nostalgia. She hadn't come back for closure. And yet here she was, waiting for a man who had once made her feel like the only woman on earth. She heard the soft pop of a bottle in the kitchen. Soren stepped out moments later, dressed in a dark t-shirt and gray lounge pants that hung low on his hips. He looked undone, not messy, but unguarded. That was rarer than any apology. He handed her a glass of chilled rose. Their fingers brushed. Neither spoke. Not yet. He followed her out onto the balcony, where the air was cool and honest. She leaned against the railing. He stood beside her, drink untouched. "You're quiet tonight," she murmured. "I'm scared," he admitted. That made her turn. "Of what?" "That you'll forgive me, and I still won't deserve you." The glass trembled slightly in her hand. She set it down, turned fully to him. "Soren." He looked up, every inch of him open, raw. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything." She stepped closer. Her voice lowered. "Are you still the man who used to make love to me like I was the only thing worth waking up for?" His throat moved. "I never stopped being him. I just lost the right to show you, then take it back." That was all he needed. His hand slid to her waist, firm but reverent. When he pulled her closer, their breath mingled in the space between regret and longing. Their kiss wasn't gentle. It was fierce, desperate, a dam breaking after 3 long years of holding back. They didn't speak as clothes fell. Her robe whispered to the floor. His shirt peeled away, revealing the body that hadn't lost its power to unravel her with a glance. When she traced her fingers down the scar over his ribs, he shivered. "Still feel that?" she asked. "Only when you touch it." His lips descended to her collarbone, then lower. He kissed her like he was relearning a language he once knew fluently. She moaned, soft, involuntary, broken. When he lifted her effortlessly onto the cool counter, her legs wrapped around his hips, locking him in. Their bodies pressed flush, skin to skin, breath to breath. "You smell the same," he whispered against her neck. "Like vanilla and vengeance." "And you still talk too much," she panted, grabbing a fistful of his hair and pulling his mouth back to hers. He carried her to the bedroom with a reverence that felt like prayer, laid her down gently, worshipped every inch of her with hands that remembered what made her arch, what made her whimper. When he entered her, she gasped, part pain, part joy. He stilled. "Too much. Not enough," she whispered, lifting her hips to take him deeper. They moved in tandem, like no time had passed. Her fingers dug into his back as he drove into her, slow and unrelenting. His mouth explored hers, then trailed down to her throat, her chest, her navel, leaving her gasping and clawing for more. "You still come apart so easily," he murmured, voice hoarse with need. "I've been holding it in for years." The tension built between them, a climb they remembered too well. Her body tightened around him. His rhythm faltered, stuttering with urgency. And when they came, together, it was like collapsing into the safest fire they'd ever known. He held her afterward, not just with arms, with silence, with weight, with presence. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Their limbs tangled, skin warm and damp. "I didn't think you'd still want me," she whispered against his chest. "I never stopped," he murmured into her hair. "I just didn't know if you could survive loving me again." She tilted her face up to him. "I didn't survive, I rebuilt." Soren pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Then maybe this time." We built together. Sunlight painted golden streaks across their skin. Isla woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of soft jazz echoing through the penthouse. Soren was in the kitchen, shirtless, humming, burning the toast like he always did. She leaned against the doorway, wrapped in one of his shirts. And for the first time in a very long time, she smiled. Because maybe, just maybe, some mistakes were meant to come back for a second try. Hello, my beautiful family. If you are still here, if you are enjoying this story, please don't forget to give this story a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below because what happens next will put you at the edge of your sit. Now let's continue. 3 days after Hila's return to New York, the results came in. Dr. Nasser called them into her office. The walls were bare, clinical, yet something about her expression carried a softness Hila hadn't seen before. "You're a match," she said. "A very strong one." Soren exhaled, his hand instinctively finding Hila's beneath the table. She didn't pull away. "Are there any risks I should know?" Hila asked, voice calm. "Every surgery carries risks, but you're in excellent health," Dr. Nasser said. "Recovery should be manageable. You'll need a few weeks of rest and there'll be some discomfort post-op, but overall, you're ideal." Ideal. It felt like a strange word for this moment. This wasn't ideal. It was necessary. It was complicated. But it was happening. Outside the office, Soren turned to her as they walked down the long corridor. "You don't have to go through with it," he said. "We can still walk away." Hila stopped. "You came to me with truth. I'm giving you mine." He waited. "I didn't say yes for your mother. I said yes, because I couldn't live with myself knowing I had the chance to save someone and turned away. I did it for me." Soren nodded, quiet. "And maybe," she added, her voice lowering, "a little for you too." The hospital scheduled the transplant for the following week. Between the appointments, Hila stayed in the penthouse, not as a guest, not as a visitor, but as something more. Every morning, Soren brought her jasmine tea, exactly how she liked it, with a single teaspoon of honey. He would sit beside her as she read, their silence shared and content. When she shivered with nerves, he held her hand. When she questioned if she was doing the right thing, he never answered for her, only listened. And when she had nightmares, he was already awake, pulling her into his arms before she could say a word. On a quiet Thursday night, they sat on the couch, watching a movie they'd seen a dozen times in their marriage. Halfway through, she turned her head. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "Even when I left, even when I hated you." He didn't say anything right away. Then he cupped her cheek. "You're the only thing I've ever loved." Without knowing how to protect. "You don't have to protect me now," she whispered. "Just stand beside me." "I will." And he kissed her again, softer this time. No urgency, no hunger, just truth. She remembered the last time she saw this version of him. It was before the gossip columns, before the damage, when he would fall asleep beside her with a hand resting on her hip, always needing to touch, even in dreams. He'd been the kind of man who bought her favorite artist's painting after she mentioned it once, who turned their kitchen into a disaster zone every Sunday trying to make her blueberry muffins. That man was still here. He'd just been buried under years of expectation and silence. Now, slowly, she was helping him dig his way out. The night before the surgery, Hila stood at the edge of the guest bedroom, suitcase already packed. Soren leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Do you want to sleep alone tonight?" he asked quietly. She looked at the bed, then at him. No. He reached out. She came to him. They didn't make love that night. They just held each other, fully clothed, wrapped in warmth and quiet breathing. Sometimes intimacy meant staying, not touching. At 6:30 a.m., the Van Alten car pulled up in front of the hospital. Soren helped Hila out, his hand steady at the small of her back. Neither of them spoke much. She wore a hoodie and leggings, minimal makeup, hair braided simply down her back. He brought her coffee. She smiled. Then came check-in, paperwork, consent forms, vitals. And finally, the prep room. She lay on the gurney in a sterile gown, Eve already inserted. Soren sat beside her, eyes shadowed with something deeper than fear. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. But he did. "I love you, Hila. I never stopped. I know I don't deserve another chance. But if you come back to me after this, I'll spend every day making sure you never regret it." She blinked through the sting. "Then don't say it now," she said softly. "Say it when I'm home, and safe, and we're building something real. Hey family, if you were Hila, would you take the risk to save someone who once tried to ruin your life? Tell us why, or why not, in the comments. These stories deserve real voices. The nurses returned. Time to go. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "See you soon," he whispered. "Don't burn the toast while I'm gone." He laughed, tears in his eyes. Then they wheeled her away, and for the first time in years, Soren Van Alten prayed for something he couldn't buy, control, or fix. He just wanted her to come back. To him. To them. To everything they could still be. The surgery lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of waiting. 4 hours of silence. 4 hours of Soren pacing the sterile hallway, palms clammy, jaw clenched, refusing coffee, phone calls, or distraction. When Dr. Nasser finally emerged, mask lowered, expression calm, he could breathe again. "She's doing well," she said. "The transplant was successful. No complications." He nodded once, then sat down on the bench outside the recovery room and wept into his hands. The room was dim, filled with soft beeping and the hum of machines. Isla opened her eyes slowly. Blinking against the fog, pain sat like a dull weight across her side. Her throat was dry, her limbs heavy, but she was here, alive, whole, and the first thing she saw was Soren, sitting beside her, eyes rimmed red, fingers laced around hers like a lifeline. "You stayed," she rasped. "I told you I wouldn't leave." A single tear slipped down her temple. "Hurts like hell." He gave a broken smile. "You're allowed to complain. You just saved a life." She squeezed his hand weakly. "Tell your mother I don't want her gratitude. Just her silence." Recovery was slow. Each movement cost her effort. But Soren made sure she never lifted a thing, never walked alone, never ate cold soup or sat in silence. He brought her books, warm compresses, every flavor of tea she liked, even ones he had to get overnighted from a shop in Kyoto. He tucked her in when she napped. He sat at her side when she couldn't sleep. And when she cried from the sharp, unexpected jabs of post-op pain, he held her and whispered nonsense until she laughed through the tears. It wasn't just care. It was devotion. 10 days after the surgery, Isla was discharged. She stood in the hospital lobby, dressed in a soft sweater and jeans, body still sore but her spine straighter than ever. Celeste never came to say goodbye. Not that Isla expected her to. She left the hospital with her head high, her eyes clear, and her heart steady. She hadn't done this for love or obligation. She did it because, for once, she chose grace over bitterness. And that grace didn't weaken her. It made her untouchable. Soren had stocked the fridge with her favorites, had her favorite flowers, white lilies on the kitchen island, had drawn her a bath and lined the edge with scented candles before she walked in. And when she stood at the balcony again, watching the skyline she once ran from, he came behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered. She leaned back into him. "Don't thank me." "Then what do I say?" "Say you meant everything you promised before they put me under." "I did." "Then prove it." That night wasn't rushed. There was no fevered reunion. Just soft music, slow dinner, shared stories of their old travels, their past selves, quiet laughter, lingering touches. When he carried her to bed, he was careful with her bandages, her soreness. He undressed her slowly, hands gentle, voice softer. And when they made love, it wasn't wild, it was reverent. Every kiss was an apology. Every touch was a vow. Every breath they took together reminded them that this was worth surviving for. They woke to golden light spilling across the sheets. Isla turned to face him. "You know this doesn't fix everything, right?" she asked. "I know. I'm still angry sometimes. You can be, and I might need space again. I'll give it, but I think I want to build something real." Soren smiled, brushing her hair back. "I'll build it with you. No shortcuts, no silence, no shadows. Dear beloved family, would you open your heart again after being broken, if love returned with honesty, humility, and growth? Share your thoughts below. Rebuilding takes two, and your voice matters here. Later that day, Isla found a sealed envelope on the nightstand, her name written in Soren's unmistakable hand. Inside, just one page. "If I could go back, I would have chosen you every time. I would have fought harder, spoken louder, risked more. But since I can't, I will spend whatever time you give me proving that the man you loved still exists and will never walk away again. S." She folded it slowly, then tucked it in her travel bag. "Some things you keep, not for proof, but because they remind you that love can learn how to try again." Isla stood outside room 702, now eerily still. She hadn't seen Celeste since the operation. No thank you, no words, just silence. And in truth, she hadn't needed one. But unfinished business had a scent, and Isla could smell it clinging to the air like perfume that refused to fade. Soren had offered to come with her. She told him no. Some closures had to be earned alone. Celeste looked smaller now. Not just physically, though the weight loss was obvious, but something deeper had cracked. She sat upright in bed, a novel in hand, reading glasses perched on her nose. Her hair was pulled back, the familiar silver now dull against the pale of her skin. When she looked up and saw Isla, her spine straightened. The book closed. "I didn't request this visit," she said curtly. Isla stepped in, shutting the door behind her. "I know. Then why are you here?" "To finish what we started." Celeste set the book aside. "If you're expecting gratitude, you're wasting your breath." Isla smiled faintly. "I expected nothing. I just came to remind you who I am." Celeste folded her hands on her lap. "You were never meant to be part of this family." "I know," Isla replied. "You made that painfully clear. You weren't strong enough for our world." "No," Isla said calmly. "I was too strong for your manipulation." A flicker crossed Celeste's face. "Discomfort? Maybe. Or recognition. I lost my son because of you." "No," Isla said, taking a step closer. "You lost him because you chose control over connection. You traded love for power. And now, you're alone in a hospital bed with a new kidney and nothing else." Celeste's jaw tightened. "I didn't come here for a battle," Isla continued. "I came to speak the truth. You tore me down," Isla said softly. "Humiliated me, fed stories to the press, made sure I was branded as a social climbing disgrace. But you know what hurt most?" Celeste didn't answer. "That you raised a son capable of love and taught him to doubt it." Silence. A long one. Then Celeste spoke. "I was protecting him." "No," Isla said. "You were protecting your legacy. You didn't want your son to love someone you couldn't control." Celeste looked away. "But I still gave you a piece of myself," Isla added. "Not because you earned it, but because I wouldn't let your cruelty turn me into you." The silence between them wasn't cold anymore, just tired. Celeste reached for the water on the bedside table. Her hands trembled slightly. "I thought I knew what strength looked like," she muttered. "And now—" Celeste met her eyes. For the first time, no venom, just fatigue. "Now I see it in you." The words weren't dramatic, but they were real, and that was enough. Isla nodded once, turned to leave. Then, just before the door opened, "Thank you." Soft, hoarse. But there, a single offering. Isla didn't stop walking, but she smiled as she stepped into the hallway. Soren waited by the car. He rose when she approached, concern etched on his face. "How did it go?" he asked. Isla opened the door, slid into the passenger seat. "She's still her," she said, "but a little less sharp, a little more human. And you?" "I'm still me." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. She remembered the first time Celeste warned her. "You'll never belong here," she'd said at a charity gala, voice sugary but cruel. "And when you fall, my son won't catch you." At the time, Isla had believed her. Now she knew better. She didn't need to belong to Celeste. She just needed to belong to herself. Isla stood at the window, glass of wine in hand. Soren joined her quietly. "She told me she thanked you," he said. "She did. Are you okay?" Isla looked out at the city. "I'm more than okay." "Why?" "Because I faced her, and I walked away without shrinking." Soren nodded slowly. "You've always been stronger than the rest of us." She glanced at him. "Then catch up." Later that night, Celeste sat alone. She picked up her novel again, then paused, reached for a notepad instead, and wrote 2 names at the top, Soren, Isla, underlined once. Then she folded the page, slipped it into the drawer, and turned off the light. Maybe grace was a choice. And maybe, just maybe, she was learning. The farmhouse sat atop a gentle hill, surrounded by trees that whispered in the late autumn wind. Honey-colored wood lined the front porch, and white-trimmed windows framed mountain views that stretched beyond reason. It wasn't finished yet. But that was the point. Isla stood barefoot on the porch, coffee mug warming her hands. The floor beneath her was solid, freshly laid cedar. Her toes curled against it. She closed her eyes and listened. Birds, wind, peace, and footsteps behind her. Strong, familiar. Soren wrapped his arms around her from behind and kissed the side of her neck. "You're quiet this morning," he murmured. "I'm not used to this kind of silence," she said. "You like it?" "I think I'm learning to The house was a collaboration, her design, his resources. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. It was theirs. Light spilled through oversized windows into an open concept kitchen where she had sketched new projects at the island. The master bedroom had vaulted ceilings and a massive picture window that framed the sunrise. There was a reading nook tucked into the corner of the upstairs loft, built specifically because he remembered her saying she wanted a place where she could disappear in a book without disappearing from the world. It wasn't a mansion. It was something far better. It was real. Their days blurred between meetings with contractors, fabric swatches, and home-cooked meals gone slightly wrong. Soren tried installing a dimmer switch once, blew a fuse. Isla painted a wall the wrong shade of blue, then fell in love with it anyway. They laughed. A lot. And when the sun dipped low and the tools were down, they danced barefoot in the unfinished living room to old jazz playing through a Bluetooth speaker. It wasn't perfect, but neither were they. That's what made it beautiful. Isla remembered the night she first opened the envelope. 3 years ago. Their house plans. He had shown them to her the week before the divorce, proud, excited. She'd never told him she cried over them after she left. Not because she lost the house, because she lost the man who had dreamed of building it for her. Now they were both back, changed, bruised, but better for it. On a quiet Sunday morning, Soren came in from the porch with flour on his face and a burned muffin tray in hand. Not edible, he declared, dropping it on the counter. Isla laughed, pulling the tray away before it set off the alarm. I told you, baking isn't your thing. But building houses, loving you, I'm pretty good at those. He wiped his hands and stepped closer. You never asked for a ring, he said. I never needed one. Still, he said, voice softer now, I want you to have something. Not because I expect a yes, but because I want you to know. I never stopped wanting to try again. He pulled a small velvet pouch from his back pocket, not a box. Nothing scripted. She opened it. Inside, a hand-cut key. Gold, slightly imperfect. The master key, he said. To our home, to this life, to everything I didn't know how to give you back then. Isla blinked through tears. This isn't a proposal. No, it's a promise. The question comes when you're ready. That afternoon they walked the property hand in hand. They talked about ridiculous things, like building a treehouse, even though neither of them had kids. Yet, they talked about business, expanding her Aspen studio, bringing her aesthetic into future Van Alten resorts. They talked about joy. They didn't talk about the past. It no longer owned them. If someone rebuilt a home and a life for you, not out of guilt, but out of love and time, would you give them a second chance? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, healing is found in shared blueprints. Please hit the like button and tap on subscribe if you haven't yet. Now let's continue. Stars blinked above the trees. The air smelled like pine and cedar and fresh earth. Isla leaned against the railing, watching Soren rock gently in the old wooden chair beside her. You know, she said, you still haven't asked the question. He smiled. And you still haven't run. She reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out the gold key. Held it up. I'm not saying yes, yet. Okay, but I'm also not going anywhere. Soren stood, stepped beside her, and kissed her temple. That's enough for me. The sound of hammering echoed through the back hall as Soren tried to install new cabinet handles. Isla stood at the threshold of the kitchen, arms folded, grinning. Is that the third handle you've cracked today? She asked. He didn't look up. It's called adjusting to resistance. It's called not using the right tools. He turned, smiling sheepishly. You still love me, though. Debatable, she said. Then walked over, pulled the screwdriver from his hand, and did it herself in 30 seconds. He just watched her. Admiration painted openly across his face. You never stop being impressive, he said. And you never stop winging things. I stopped winging the important stuff. She paused, met his gaze. That line landed, deeply. Later that day, she found him standing in the smallest of the 3 guest rooms, staring at the bare walls. What are you thinking? She asked. He turned. That we could turn this into something more than a guest space? Yeah, he said softly. A future space, for when, if, that chapter ever opens. Her breath caught, not out of fear, but because of the tenderness behind it. We're not there yet, she said, stepping beside him. I know, but it's a beautiful thought. He leaned in, kissed her shoulder. I want to make space for everything that might be, not just what is. It started in the bathtub. He'd drawn it for her, lavender salts, candles flickering along the edge. The room smelled like calm, but it didn't stay calm. Not when he slid in behind her, water sloshing gently, his chest against her back. He kissed her shoulder, her neck, her jaw. She tilted her head, eyes closed. His hands explored her underwater, slow and reverent. She arched against him, whispering his name like a secret she'd kept too long. They didn't rush. He peeled her robe open, like it was made of petals. She undressed him slowly, unbutton by unbutton, until he stood before her, all muscle and heat and sincerity. They kissed like they had 1,000 lifetimes ahead of them. And when he entered her, their bodies molded back into rhythm like nothing had changed, and everything had. Her moans were soft at first, then deeper. His name left her lips with raw need. They made love with windows open, no shame, no hiding. When they reached the edge together, it was quiet. No screaming, no chaos, just breathing. Fast, then slow, like a storm that passed without breaking them. She lay curled against his chest, tracing the line of his collarbone. "Do you know the moment I knew I loved you again?" she asked. He looked down. "Tell me." "That day you brought me jasmine tea and didn't ask a single question. You just sat beside me and waited." Soren kissed the top of her head. "I would have waited forever." "You almost did," she teased. "And I'd do it again." She remembered an old night in their first apartment. They'd fought, loud, irrational, fueled by stress. Then the power had gone out. And in the pitch black, he found her hand, pulled her close, and danced to music only they could hear. They never solved the problem that night, but they remembered how to hold each other. It was the first time they learned that love wasn't always loud. It was patient, steady, and worth returning to. A week later, Isla unrolled the blueprints for a new project. It was a mountain retreat commission from an international client, a big deal. Soren looked it over. "Modern lines, warm textures," he said. "It feels like you." She smiled. "It's supposed to. They hired me because of the press after the transplant. Wanted the woman who saved the billionaire's mother and then rebuilt her own life." He smirked. "That's quite the headline." "It's not the headline I care about," she said, stepping into his space. "It's the foundation we're building behind it. Have you ever let someone back in, not just to your heart, but into the life you were still building? Comment below, because the strongest foundations sometimes rise from second chances. The sun was setting. They stood on the front porch of their nearly finished home, arms around each other, watching the light turn everything amber. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Coming back to me." He turned, cupped her face. "I regret every moment I didn't." Then he kissed her, slow and full. No more questions, no more waiting, just the life they were finally ready to live. It was a surprise visit, one of those moments you don't plan, but something inside you says now. Isla and Soren flew back to Manhattan for a board meeting at Van Alten Global. Just 48 hours. In, out, but the city had other plans. Rain came down in thin sheets as they walked past their old apartment building in the Upper West Side. Soren paused under the awning, eyes tracking the familiar stonework, windows they'd once argued behind, kissed beneath. "Want to go in?" he asked. Isla shook her head. No, but she didn't keep walking either. 3 years ago they lived here, before tabloids, before courtrooms, before her heart broke in a dozen quiet ways. She remembered coming home late one evening after a client presentation, soaking wet, exhausted, excited, and finding Soren in the kitchen, not listening, barely present, preoccupied with something on his phone. She told him she'd just landed her biggest project yet. He nodded, said that's great, and never asked again. That moment had stayed with her, not because it was loud, but because it was silent when she needed to be seen. Later that night, at the Van Alten offices, Soren retrieved something from his personal safe. A manila folder, aged by time. He handed it to Isla without ceremony. "I found this 6 months ago," he said. "I didn't know it existed." She sat down, opened it. Inside, emails, notes, forwarded messages, all from Celeste, all dated during their marriage. Bribes to tabloids, threats to her clients, lies wrapped in polite language sent to board members, warning them about her emotional volatility. "Jesus," Isla breathed. "I didn't believe it at first, thought they were fabricated." She looked at him. "But they weren't." No. And you never saw this when it happened? I didn't want to, he said. Back then, I was so busy chasing power, I ignored everything that didn't fit my version of control. Isla folded the folder shut. So she destroyed me from your blind spot. I let her, Soren whispered. They sat in silence for a while. No tears, no anger, just acknowledgement. Why show me now? She asked. Because we're building something honest, and you deserve every truth, even the ones that make me look like a coward. She reached across the table and took his hand. You weren't a coward, she said. You were just too conditioned to see anything outside your mother's world. I see now. I know. One of their few good memories. Paris, early spring, before the scandal. She remembered the cafe by the Seine, their fingers tangled across the table, a private language of glances and teasing smiles. He'd kissed her wrist while she read menus, told her she looked like art. That day, he'd promised they'd grow old in a house full of books and light. Maybe that dream had cracked. But maybe, just maybe, it hadn't shattered completely. They visited the apartment building again. This time, they went in. The concierge recognized Soren immediately and let them walk through the empty unit that had once been their first home. Dusty, vacant, but echoes of laughter and slammed doors still lived in the walls. Isla stood in the old bedroom doorway. I used to cry here, she said softly. Soren came behind her, slid his arms around her waist. And I was too proud to ask why. She turned in his arms. I cried because I loved you more than you were ready to be loved. He pressed his forehead to hers. And now, she smiled faintly. Now I love you with eyes wide open. Back at the hotel, Soren handed her a note. From Celeste, written in fine pen, folded neatly. You were not what I wanted for my son, but I was wrong to destroy what made him whole. I hope you find more forgiveness than I deserve. Celeste. Isla set the note on the nightstand. No words, no reaction. Some things didn't require responses. They simply needed to be read, and then let go. As their flight taxied the runway that evening, Isla reached for Soren's hand. He laced his fingers through hers. No more secrets? She asked. Never again. No more rewriting the past. Only writing what comes next. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time, Manhattan didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a page that had finally been turned. 10 men and 4 women sat around a glossy table, all bearing the Van Alten name in some way, through blood, marriage, or power. At the head sat Soren. Next to him, Isla. The whispers had started before they even entered. That she was back. That she was beside him again. That he'd invited her into the very center of the world she had once been exiled from. Soren didn't flinch. He tapped his knuckles once against the glass surface, drawing full attention. I'm restructuring, he began. One by one, heads turned. I've consolidated all subsidiary branches into a single core division, Van Alten Creative, he continued. It'll oversee all property development, design partnerships, and branding. And Isla Monroe will lead it as Chief Vision Director. A pause. Then murmurs. She's not family, one executive whispered. She is, Soren said clearly. And she's the only reason this company has a future that's actually worth something. A senior board member, a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and a name that stretched back 3 generations, cleared his throat. And what does your mother say about this? Soren looked him in the eye. My mother no longer has voting power. As of this morning, she signed over her interests. The silence was cold and glorious. She agreed? Someone asked in disbelief. No, Soren replied. But she understood she didn't have a choice anymore. They walked together through the marble hallway, Isla's heels tapping softly. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did. You could have kept me separate from the company. We could have... No, Soren cut in. You built this empire with me once, even when you were in the shadows. Now, I want your name on the door. She paused, turned toward him. This isn't just about business. I know. It's about erasing everything your mother tried to bury. No, he said. It's about rewriting it with you beside me. Years ago, in the middle of one of their happiest nights, Isla had handed Soren a leather-bound sketchbook. Inside were concept designs, resort spaces, villas, boutique properties she dreamed of one day building under the Van Alten name. She'd laughed when she gave it to him, called it a fantasy. He never laughed back. He remembered looking at the pages like they were gold. After the divorce, he locked that book away in his private safe. Now, he had brought it back, and this time he was funding every dream. The new flagship project launched in Barcelona, an eco-luxury resort built into the cliffs, merging local artisanship with modern warmth. It wasn't loud. It wasn't opulent. It was elegant and deeply thoughtful. Every magazine picked it up. Van Alten Creative breaks ground with Isla Munro's bold vision. Every blog praised its ethos. Finally, a resort designed by someone who values intimacy over excess. And every time someone said her name with admiration, Soren watched from the sidelines, proud, quiet, whole. The New York design studio, top floor of a Chelsea loft, was all Isla. Whitewashed brick, rich wood floors, green velvet sofas, large art canvases on the walls. And no family portraits. When a new intern nervously asked if she was Mrs. Van Alten, Isla simply smiled. Not officially, she replied, but close enough to change the building. It wasn't planned. Celeste asked for her, by name. At the private townhouse uptown, Isla entered the sitting room with no fear. Celeste sat by the window, blanket across her lap, hands resting on a teacup. I heard you're building again, she said. I am. For him? For me? Celeste looked out the window. I see now that I confused silence for superiority and control for care. Isla didn't respond. I won't ask for forgiveness, Celeste added. But I hope someday you'll believe I wasn't entirely heartless. Isla's voice was calm. I don't need to believe anything about you anymore. Celeste blinked, then nodded. That was the last time they spoke. Back in the Berkshires, the farmhouse glowed under amber lights. Soren stood by the fireplace, barefoot, holding 2 glasses of wine. Isla stepped in, barefoot too, in an oversized sweater and sleepy eyes. He handed her a glass. To independence, he said. She raised hers. To love that didn't need rescuing, but still found a way back. They clinked and sipped. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, casting soft gold across the sheets. Isla lay tangled in white linen, wearing nothing but a satisfied smile and the thin sheen of last night's pleasure. Soren stepped into the room holding a tray, coffee, strawberries, and burnt toast. You're lucky you're pretty, she murmured. He laughed, set the tray down, then leaned over to kiss her shoulder. You didn't seem to mind my imperfections last night. Her eyes sparkled. You were very persuasive. She sat up, pulled his t-shirt over her head. It swallowed her frame. He watched her move like he had every right to, every curve of her body seared into his memory. And yet, it still felt new. Why do you always stare like you're seeing me for the first time? She asked. Because I always am. He stepped closer, brushing hair from her cheek. Every day you're different, stronger, softer, wilder, flatterer, truth-teller. Their mouths met slowly, hungrily. What followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't planned, but it was real. She guided him down beside her, fingers curling into his hair as he kissed along her collarbone. His hands explored her like familiar territory he still had reverence for, palms gliding down her ribs, pausing at her hips. She arched beneath him, breath catching. You always know where to touch, she whispered. He didn't reply. He just did it again. Her moans filled the room in rising tempo, body meeting his with rhythm and release. They moved together like they remembered, like their bodies spoke a language older than time. And when they reached their climax, it was with their eyes locked. Because this wasn't just lust. It was homecoming. Later, Isla lay in his arms, tracing lazy circles on his chest. Do you remember the first hotel we stayed in together? She asked. Madrid. You brought your sketch pad. We never left the room. She chuckled. I redesigned their entire floor plan on a napkin. I still have that napkin. She lifted her head. Seriously? He nodded. I laminated it. That's insane. It's love. After breakfast, they headed to the small studio behind the house, a space they converted for brainstorming, blueprints, and the occasional wine-fueled strategy session. Pinned on the board, new resort projects, a mentorship program Isla was launching for young female designers, and mock-ups for a joint architectural design scholarship. I don't just want to build properties anymore, she said, tapping a marker against the board. I want to build people. You always did. She turned to him. Would you be okay stepping back a little? Soren leaned against the wall, watching her pace. You're not just stepping forward, Isla. You're leading. She remembered standing on a rooftop with him in Venice, both wrapped in blankets, the city lights blinking beneath them. She'd whispered, "Do you think love can evolve?" He'd said, "Only if you let it surprise you." They had fallen asleep right there, curled on patio furniture, with no answers. Now they had them. The farmhouse had a small garden space that Isla had been experimenting with, nothing elaborate. Just herbs, lavender, and 2 lemon trees in big planters. She knelt in the dirt-gloved hands brushing against rosemary when Soren came behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You're going to ruin your shirt," she said. "Then I'll ruin it for a good cause." He kissed the back of her neck. She leaned back into him. "You're distracting me. I'm trying to." She turned, dirt-smudged and glowing, and he kissed her like the world stopped spinning. They sat beside each other on the wide bench near the picture window. Sketches were scattered across the floor. A record player spun old jazz in the background. "I don't want a wedding," Isla said. Soren looked up. "Okay. I want something different, quiet, intentional, just us." "Okay. But I do want forever." He reached over, took her hand. "You already have it." It had been almost 6 months. The city no longer felt like a place of exile. It was simply another chapter in her story, one that no longer dictated the ending. Isla didn't tell Soren she was coming. He had meetings in Miami, and this was something she needed to do alone. The town car pulled up outside the private rehabilitation center, where Celeste Van Alten was now recovering from a recent complication. It wasn't a hospital, not quite a home. Somewhere in between. She walked in with no ceremony, no agenda, just a quiet sense that something still needed to be said, or perhaps not said at all. Celeste sat on a shaded terrace overlooking a modest courtyard. Her once sculpted frame had softened. Her hair was thinner, loosely tied. The sharpness in her posture was gone, replaced by something humbler. Not weak, just surrendered. She didn't flinch when she saw Isla. Didn't speak, just nodded. Isla sat down opposite her, crossing her legs. No words passed for a long moment. Finally, Celeste exhaled. "So, you came. I wasn't sure I would, but you did." Isla glanced at the blooming vines crawling up the trellis behind her. "Not because I needed to, but because I no longer carry the weight of what you did." Celeste nodded again, slower this time. "I destroyed something beautiful," she admitted. "And then I lived long enough to realize it." "There's no apology that can undo the damage," Celeste said. "But I want you to know I no longer justify what I did." "I'm not here for your apology," Isla replied calmly. "I'm here to acknowledge that I've healed, and healing doesn't require revenge, just distance and peace." Celeste's eyes were tired. "He's happier now." "He is. Because of you?" "No," Isla corrected. "Because he chose to grow." Celeste leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes briefly. "Then maybe I didn't fail entirely." Isla stood. "That's not for me to decide." As she turned to leave, Celeste's voice followed softly. "There's a folder in my room, labeled Legacy. Take it." Isla hesitated. "Why?" "I kept everything," Celeste said. "The real estate blueprints, your first pitches, the letters you wrote him when he traveled. I kept them because, somewhere in the part of me I kept chained, I knew you mattered." Isla didn't respond, but she did take the folder. She stepped back into the sun, the city humming around her. The weight she once carried through these streets was gone. Not replaced, just no longer needed. She walked with slow steps, not rushing toward anything, not running from anything, just walking. She remembered standing on the rooftop of their Montauk home, barefoot, dusk curling around their shoulders. Soren had leaned in, pressed his lips to hers and whispered, "Even if the world turns against us, I'll never unchoose you." Back then, she didn't know how to believe him. Now, she didn't need to be convinced. That evening, Soren returned to the farmhouse just before dinner. She was in the kitchen barefoot, stirring a pot of pasta sauce, humming to a record. He paused in the doorway, watching. "Long day?" she asked without turning. "Long flight?" "Better now." He kissed her neck, arms sliding around her waist. She leaned back against him. "I went to see her." Soren stilled. "And she's not who she was. Are you okay?" "I am." "Did she say anything worth remembering?" Isla turned to him, sliding her arms around his shoulders. She said, "I mattered, and I believed it. Not because she finally said it, but because I already knew. He smiled. You always did. Have you ever faced someone who once broke you and realized you no longer needed their apology to be free? Share your strength in the comments. You never know who needs to hear your story. Please hit like and subscribe if you're still here enjoying this story. She opened the legacy folder alone in the study. Inside were hand-drawn sketches of properties they once dreamed about, notes in Celeste's writing, clipped news articles about Isla's career milestones, even a copy of their wedding invitation, one Isla hadn't seen in years. But at the very bottom, folded separately, was a short note. I tried to erase you because I couldn't understand how someone like you could belong in a world I believed only I controlled. And now I see, your belonging never needed my permission. She set the folder down and left it there. Some things weren't meant to be kept, just seen, then released. Soren joined her on the porch later, 2 mugs of hot cider in hand. They sat in the swing, the night soft around them. You look at peace, he said. I am. What now? She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. Now, we live, not as survivors, not as rebuilders, but as something new, whole, together. The sky above the farmhouse was clean and wide, dressed in late summer blue. Guests gathered beneath white linen canopies, laughter spilling into the air like music. Glasses clinked. Shoes slipped off on the grass. Someone played a soft acoustic set near the old tree they'd strung with lights. This wasn't a wedding in the traditional sense. There were no flower girls, no assigned seating, no altar, just a celebration of 2 people who had already done the hard part, finding their way back. Isla stepped out from the porch in a cream dress, simple, linen, off the shoulder. Her curls pinned up, skin glowing with that kind of peace that isn't bought, it's earned. Soren turned as she walked toward him. No tucks, no pretense, just linen trousers, rolled sleeves, and the expression of a man who knew what it meant to lose something irreplaceable. And get it back. They spoke from memory. No rehearsals, no witnesses holding scripts. Just Isla, her voice steady. You are not the reason I became whole, but you are the reason I believed it was still possible. And Soren, eyes wet but unbroken, I failed you once because I didn't know how to hold something I wasn't sure I deserved. I promised to never make that mistake again. Then came silence, the kind that says everything. Then came the kiss, and 100 hands clapping, wiping tears, raising glasses in joy. The farmhouse became more than a home. It was where she mentored a team of young designers from around the country, giving them the opportunities she never had. Where he restructured Van Alten Global to give back, investing in sustainable housing and wellness centers for communities overlooked for too long. Where they hosted quiet dinners with friends and family who had survived their own wars. Where laughter echoed through the halls and music played late into the night. One day, Isla found herself back in the small 3rd room, the one they once discussed turning into a guest space, then something more. She stood in the center, barefoot, imagining paint on the walls. Soren entered behind her, pausing at the threshold. You thinking about color schemes again? She turned, smiled. I might be. He leaned against the doorframe. Is that your way of telling me something? She bit her lip and nodded. His eyes widened, then softened. He crossed the room in 2 strides, scooped her into his arms, spun her once before setting her down gently. No pressure, he whispered against her hair. We'll do this our way. Our way is all I've ever needed, she whispered back. Months earlier, on a foggy April morning, Isla had walked into the kitchen holding a velvet box. Inside, the gold key he gave her, now with a simple diamond set into the handle. She held it out. Still want me to use it? She asked. Soren set down his mug, stepped forward, and wrapped his arms around her. Every day, the party had dwindled. A few guests sat around a fire pit. Someone strummed a guitar softly. Soren and Isla sat on the porch swing, his hand resting on her belly, her head against his shoulder. They didn't speak, didn't need to. In the distance, their home glowed like a beacon, not because of the lights, but because of what it held. Not just memories, not just redemption, but life, love, and the quiet promise of everything still to come. If this story touched something in your heart, if it reminded you that healing is possible, that love can return stronger, and that forgiveness isn't weakness but power, then don't let it end here. Tell us in the comments, would you take back someone who broke you? If they returned with growth, humility, and a promise to try again? Like this video if you believe in second chances. Share it with someone who needs this message today. And subscribe to Love and Twilights for more unforgettable stories that stir your soul and leave you thinking long after the last line. Until next time, stay brave, stay open, and never stop believing in the kind of love that finds its way home.